US President Donald Trump is set to impose more tariffs, and he doubles down on his solution for Gaza. Hello, I'm Arnold Knight, and this is The Heat. US President Trump promised shock and awe when he returned to the White House, and 3 weeks into his second term, his actions and initiatives continue at a hectic pace, including efforts to transform government in Washington, D.C. Controversially, he is also reaffirming a plan to take over Gaza. Meanwhile, on the economic front, he says he will impose a 25% tariff on imports of steel and aluminium. That action is expected to hit neighboring countries, Canada and Mexico, the hardest. We begin with this report from Nathan King.
In the first Trump term, where Donald Trump imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum, with a lot of exceptions, by the way, including Canada, General Motors and Ford had to issue profit warnings because their prices went up. Now, we don't have an official announcement from Donald Trump yet. Here at the White House, he is known to be signing executive orders today, but there's been no press call, which is usually a time when he will tell us what's going on. But he was adamant on his plane yesterday that the tariffs are either coming in today or we're hearing maybe tomorrow as well. Let's take a listen.
What countries will those go on?
Everybody. Steel.
Including Canada and Mexico?
Yeah. Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum, too.
Now, poor old Canada. I mean, last week they had tariffs suspended for 30 days. They thought they got away with it. Canada is by far the biggest exporter of steel into the United States globally. I think it's about $50 billion a year. And Trump seems in no mood to give exemptions like he did last time. Behind that is Mexico. Brazil is another one to look out for. China, yes, too, but already there's tariffs on that. So we'll wait and see. The European Union could also be hit hard, and the UK as well, to about $500 million. The thing is that everyone will have to respond as well, because it's in their national interest to do so, to stand up to tariffs. And even without them being imposed at the moment, you see the effect on the stock market. You also feel the effect on sentiment. Who's going to make investment decisions when it comes to metals now, when the threat of tariffs, even if it's not imposed right away, hangs in the balance? So quite incredible.
Now, to weigh in on all of this, joining me is Eric Bolling. He is a New York Times best-selling author and host of the Bolling Show and podcast. With us too is Rina Shah. She is a political analyst and commentator. Also joining the discussion is Joseph Williams. He is a former senior editor for US News and World Report. And from New York, we are joined by journalist and commentator Aaron Maté. He is the host of Pushback with Aaron Maté on the Grayzone. Welcome to all of you. Eric Bolling, let me start with you. And I was saying that President Trump plans to impose those 25% tariffs on imports of steel and aluminium. Well, he's just done so, just this minute. So this, of course, will result in added costs to United States manufacturers and ultimately to consumers. So nobody likes prices going up. Could there be a backlash against these kinds of tariffs that he's imposing?
I don't like tariffs. I'm a free market libertarian, but I'm not sure any of these things actually make it to fruition. I know he's imposing the tariffs. He also imposed a tax and tariff on Mexico and Canada and China, which he paused. Mexico and Canada. It seems like the world does not want to mess with Donald Trump. Clearly, the American people gave Donald Trump the mandate to go be Donald Trump, do what he did to build the Trump empire. And I think what these things are doing is making people realize that he means business. Like, this isn't Donald Trump 1.0. He couldn't have pulled this off, Donald Trump 1.0. He's doing this now because he realizes they're standing up, taking notice. Things like Canada could be our 51st state, and it was kind of a joke, and then all of a sudden, well, hell, maybe it is. Greenland may be a U.S. territory. Panama Canal, we may take it back. And these tariffs, if Trump puts in these tariffs, he realizes the power of the American consumer. You want to play game? No one wants to pick this fight with Donald Trump. Our consumer is 70% of our economy, but also $7 trillion worth of purchases of all these countries. Can you imagine if I'll do it again, Arnon. It's like the world is one big mall. China is a retail operation. Mexico's one. So is Canada. So is Brazil. So are all these countries, Germany. They're all selling stuff to the consumer, the biggest consumer in the world. It's Donald Trump, the United States, walking around the mall and going, you know what? I may not want to buy that from you because you're not giving it to me at a sales price. You're charging me more to come in and buy your stuff. And conversely, you're charging our corporations to sell into your country. I think if Trump is right, he'll lower the tariffs across the board unilaterally, both directions, and the world will have less inflation, not just the United States. So he says it may feel like it a little more inflationary right now, but the end result typically would be, if he's right, would be lower costs, prices across the globe.
Okay, we shall see what will happen. Aaron Mate, Canada, of course, is the biggest supplier of steel to the United States. I mean, he's already threatened Canada with tariffs before he talked about and signed this latest executive order on new tariffs, 25% tariffs for Canada. I mean, what is the view from Canada? How is this impacting the relationship between these two countries?
Well, the view from Canada is already skeptical of Trump, given that he's openly calling for annexing Canada, making it the 51st state. So perhaps from Canada, this is seen as part of that Trump agenda to weaken Canada more. The U.S. economy obviously grows at a much faster pace than Canada. It's a lot stronger, and Canada is very dependent on the U.S. So this will hurt Canadians a lot. But this also will hurt American consumers, as you mentioned earlier. And Trump has been very blasé about that. He said people understand there has to be short-term pain. Well, do people understand that? After Trump campaigned on lowering the cost of living for people, for Trump to carry out policies that will immediately increase it through his tariffs. So I think Trump is taking for granted the mandate he's been given and is distorting it. And my concern here is I feel like consumers in all countries are being punished for the bad decisions of their leaders. It wasn't the fault of American consumers or Canadians that U.S. presidents like Bill Clinton and corporate leaders shipped all their jobs and plants overseas, decided to deindustrialize the U.S. and put plants in Mexico, take advantage of cheaper costs in China. And so now it's consumers in all countries that are being told to foot the bill.
Something else I have to ask you about, Aaron, and that is the reason why he is imposing these kinds of tariffs on Canada. He says Canada is responsible for illegal migrants coming into the United States, and also that Canada is responsible for fentanyl coming into the United States. And there have been numerous studies, numerous reports that tell us that that is not true.
The responsibility of fentanyl coming to the U.S. Comes from the fact that the U.S. has a society where there's a lot of addiction. And the way to address that would be to look at the social roots of addiction, including trauma in this country, which is where addiction comes from. You can try to blame Canada or blame other countries for addiction in this country, but the problem is not so much the supply, it's the demand. And that I don't see in Trump any effort to address.
Rina, good to see you. Now, Mexico and some European countries, as well as Brazil, countries like Germany could also be hit with tariffs. I mean, what is this doing to the United States' reputation internationally? And of course, domestically, we could see economic hardship.
The way I see it, these tariffs are being used as a negotiating tactic. And I think that's quite what the Trump administration wants to show as well, is that they are capable of being smart and strategic this time. You know, you look at the people around Trump this time, they're very different than the first term. It doesn't take anybody to look very deep to even see that. Superficially, you already see President Trump behaving in a manner in which I think is a bit of a continuation of what he promised when he first ran and in his first term. But I don't see him taking anything for granted this time. If anything, I see him moving full steam ahead to give that show of force, whether to our allies or to our adversaries, to say, we are America, you will kneel at our feet. And that is really what I see that's going on here. He's made no secret of that. He likes to portray strength and believes that an America that forces its allies even into submission is a better America. So Also, something that should be noted here on it that it's not uncommon for any country. But I'm particularly thinking of India here. You know, the world's largest democracy that has enacted "Made in India" policies. Well, what is Trump doing? He's enacting essentially policies that are going to force "Made in America" initiatives, and I don't think that's a horrible thing. You know, look, will people like me, working mothers who really rely on inexpensive, accessible goods for our kids, for our partners, for ourselves. Will we feel the burn? Absolutely. I don't like tariffs either, but I do feel that they're being used as a negotiating tactic here. And one thing is Trump is doing, I mean, I think personally he would love to build the Trump empire continually. He again makes no secret of that. But I think what he really wants to do, because this is a legacy now for him that he wants to leave, is really show that he can rebuild the American empire of manufacturing greatness.
Joseph Williams, I want to talk to you about the major overhaul that's going on in government, especially here in Washington, D.C. But first, let me ask you for your opinion on what Rina just told us. Do you think this is just a negotiating tactic? And do you think, ultimately, Trump is going to be able to attract manufacturing jobs back to the United States?
I mean, he's not the first president to have tried to attract manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Will tariffs help? I sincerely doubt it. Mainly because by inflicting pain, you don't necessarily get the result that you want. You get a populace that's angry about higher prices. You get frustration with your allies who don't really understand exactly where this is going. I mean, I take Rina's point very seriously, but it's hard to see in service of negotiation for what? I mean, what are we getting in exchange for these tariff threats? What are we getting for this uncertainty other than volatile markets, alienation from our allies, and hollow promises about something that they'll do for a problem that they don't even have?
Okay, Joseph, let's go to this overhaul that we're seeing, mainly spearheaded by the new agency called DOGE, headed by Elon Musk. I mean, it's a massive overhaul of the United States government. Budgets are being slashed. There are thousands of federal workers who are being laid off. The president even wants to dismantle the Department of Education. I mean, how much is all of this affecting the day-to-day functioning of government?
Well, not yet, but it's going to pretty soon. I mean, right now, government is still functioning mainly because it's got a lot of momentum, and these institutional changes that Musk and his cohorts want to make really haven't taken root just yet. But it is really disturbing to see that you've got a billionaire who's probably one of the most powerful men on the planet outside of Trump, who is able to go into these agencies without fetter and without any kind of a plan that we know of as the public. Because keep in mind, we pay these folks salaries. We are taxpayers. We're supposed to know what's going on in our government, but it's been very secretive. Members of Congress can't even get in, and that's really quite disturbing. It seems like it's a formation of an autocracy that we really don't know that we don't want, and we won't know until these cuts actually start happening. But we do know that so far in DC, it's been causing a lot of confusion with people. Traffic was tied up. There were not enough parking spaces at one agency, not enough desks at another agency, mainly because the government restructuring happened during the pandemic and they downsized their office space. So it's going to be a problem. As to where this all goes and the Department of Education, I think it would be a tremendous mistake to get rid of the DOE, but it seems like we're heading in that direction. If it doesn't get eliminated entirely, certainly it's going to be hollowed out and rendered essentially toothless by the time Linda McMahon gets through with it.
Eric Bolling, you know, these actions that the president is taking, he's been ruling by executive order since he took office on January 20th. They're already being challenged in the courts. In fact, Vice President J.D. Vance is challenging the court's authority. Over the weekend, he said judges are not the courts of J.D. Vance. He said judges are not allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. I mean, this could all end up in the United States Supreme Court. I mean, could the president prevail there, or are we heading for what some commentators are calling a constitutional crisis?
Well, you know, first of all, if I made the last gentleman who was talking about prices rising,
it was Joseph.
Everyone, very quickly, here's what Trump did very wisely. The first shot he took was with Canada and Mexico, two countries we share a continent with. The rest of the world is saying if he's willing to do that with his neighbors, what's he willing to do with us? He means business. Tariffs will come down unilaterally, prices will come down. These people on the left who are complaining about the waste, fraud, and abuse that the DOGE and Trump are uncovering, specifically at USAID, where billions upon billions of dollars are being mismanaged, lost, and gone. It's amazing that the Democrats would even show their faces when we're finding out some of the things that they were spending our money on. USAID was initially put out to promote free markets, freedom across the world, and push back Nazi communism. And now all of a sudden it's spending money for the most ridiculous pet projects, LGBTQ musicals in Ireland. It became a slush fund for the Democrats. They're exposed, they don't like it, and they're putting up a big fight. Department of Education, Trump has said he was going to do it. Sorry, it's happening. What does the Department of Education do for the American people besides giving American students the 40th highest average scores in math and reading and costing the world, on the scale of the world, the most per student in the entire world?
Right, but Eric, getting back to my question, this is going to end up in the courts, isn't it?
Okay, so you know what, Aaron? Joe Biden did the same thing. He did the same thing by trying to excuse student debt. He wasn't allowed to do it. Congress said no. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, Joe, you can't do it, and then he went ahead and did it anyway. So the Democrats saying don't do it, take a look back about a year and a half ago, and you'll see something different.
Okay, Aaron Mehta, we've seen some protests against what Trump is doing, but why has there been no bigger pushback from Democrats? I mean, they are the opposition in Congress. I mean, have they been too weakened after the election?
I think they're starting to find their footing in pushing back on this. The Democratic lawmakers had a rally trying to save USAID. My problem here is that both sides are being disingenuous of the USAID debate. Democrats who defend USAID cast it as a purely humanitarian program, but it's not true. It has been a slush fund to fund things that have nothing to do with promoting democracy or feeding people. They actually have to do with destabilizing governments that the U.S. wants to bring into its orbit. You can see examples of that from Haiti to Ukraine. In Haiti, for example, and Bill Clinton admitted to this, the U.S. subsidized U.S. rice farmers to dump their rice into Haiti, which wiped out the Haitian rice industry and caused a lot of suffering there. In Ukraine, it was used to fund people who took part in the 2014 Maidan coup. So plenty to criticize when it comes to Ukraine. Democrats, though, are falsely claiming otherwise. And Republicans, meanwhile, are focusing not on the, I think, damaging aspects of USAID that destabilize the countries that USAID claims to help, but on relatively low-hanging fruit like woke programs and LGBT things, which, you can criticize if you want, but are not the main problems, I think, with USAID. And Democrats, look, they're having a problem. They're going through an identity crisis. They lost to Donald Trump. They tried everything they could to undermine him. They framed him as a Russian agent in his first term. They brought all these legal cases against them that have all failed and blown up in their faces. And now they're scrambling to come up with plans that can make them an actual opposition party rather than focusing on Trump via lawfare that is blown up in their faces.
Right, Rina, there's been so much happening over the last 3 weeks. Sometimes it's difficult to keep track. I mean, let's talk about the crackdown on illegal migrants. People are being rounded up. They are being deported. I mean, where do you see the Trump administration going with this? And, what kind of atmosphere is it generating among immigrant communities?
Well, I think it's most important to note that this was a campaign promise of Trump's that was not just central to his campaign, but the one in which he was most eager to make good on the minute he walked into the White House. And he's got a great guy in Tom Homan to do that, because that guy wants revenge. He wants all these folks who are here and have come here illegally, or what have you. They've managed to overstay a visa. He wants them all out. Now, what you hear from Republicans, some of them, very far-right Republicans, is that so many of these migrants are criminals, that they're wreaking havoc in our communities, there are public safety problems with them, all of that. I'm a daughter of legal immigrants, so I'm, of course, going to take issue with anybody that's jumped the line and done this illegally. Staying here, even overstaying a visa, I think is a very serious offense. But we have a very broken system in which we don't even track people properly. When you come into the country, we count you, but do we ever count how and when you leave really properly? No. I mean, we're a country that seems to just say, come one, come all, we'll house you, clothe you, feed you, and it's a great thing to do for those who really need it. Legitimate asylum claims, but those are also hard to figure out. So right now there's genuine fear amongst communities, whether they be Hispanic, Asian, of Asian descent. People are fearful because they know know how rough this administration is going to be with anybody that cannot produce papers. I do think it must be noted that the birthright citizenship endeavor that the Trump administration decided to take on week one is so misguided and so actually laughable to me that they would even try to explore that. The courts have pushed back. When something like birthright citizenship is enshrined in the Constitution, it is a seriously misguided endeavor to try to eliminate that. I get that there are people that come over and do things that are not right, such as just come over and have a baby and it be the anchor baby, right? And suddenly they have an American child. But at the end of the day, we need both sides to come together and do comprehensive immigration reform. The reality, though, is this. A lot of Americans will not say it out loud. They are for mass deportations, and Trump and his ilk are making good on it. Very scary for those who are here not with the legitimate papers.
Joseph Williams, I want to turn to the other big issue that's been making a lot of news over the past week, and that is Trump and his plans for what he calls his solution to Gaza. Now, he's doubled down on the initial announcement that he wants to take over Gaza, he wants to develop it, he wants to make it into some kind of Riviera in the Middle East. In fact, during an interview on Fox News, he said he wants to move the Palestinians out of Gaza, and he's proposing a U.S. takeover. Let's listen to some of that interview.
We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians have the right to return?
No big money spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them.
So according to President Trump, the Palestinians would be moved out, Joseph, and they wouldn't be allowed to return. And the president's preference is to move the Palestinians out to Jordan and to Egypt. And the leaders of both those countries have said absolutely not. That's not going to be happening. In fact, the king of Jordan, King Abdullah, is in the United States right now. He will be meeting with President Trump tomorrow at the White House. He's rejected President Trump's plan, unequivocally rejected it. How do you see this playing out?
It would be laughable if it weren't so frightening. I mean, to see how it plays out, I mean, predicting anything in this environment is highly hazardous. We can't know what's going to come next. That's part of the problem. I also think that's part of the plan. And I think that if he's talking about the United States propagating essentially what would be a war crime in terms of ethnic cleansing, I don't think that's a very good idea. It's a great way to build resentment among Palestinians, as if there weren't enough already against the United States. It's also a great way to foment and create your own terrorist network to come and target the United States. Besides, and in addition, is this legal, number one? Number two, who actually is going to be profiting from said Riviera, from land that people had been ordered off of? And three, how is this even remotely in the United States' interest? I mean, certainly it gives Israel a lot of power and a lot of clout, and we've been trying to come up with a two-state solution. But if he wants to get on the wrong side of the entire Arab world, create another potential attack against the United States with people who are feeling resentful, and justifiably so, at being pushed off their land, that's a great way to do it. I think there are very more important problems that we should be thinking about, and more just and more legal problems that we should be thinking about in ways to solve the Middle East crisis than developing a Riviera on Gaza, which has been contested land for centuries. It's a really terrible idea.
Eric, you know, Joseph telling us that this could cause a great deal of resentment among Palestinians. It could also cause a great deal of resentment among Middle Eastern countries. You know, that announcement was made during the visit to Washington by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But, you know, isn't this a very high-risk proposal that could send a very negative message to the Middle East, could actually ultimately lead to destabilization in the region?
Is there stability in the region, Arnon? And correct me if I'm wrong, but there hasn't been in 60 years. There's no stability. Israel is America's greatest ally, I would say, bar none. They're certainly strategically located to keep an eye on things in the Middle East. I think the most brilliant thing is for the Egyptians to take the people from the Gaza Strip. I'm not calling Palestinian because I don't believe Palestine is a state. A lot of people don't. Okay. put them with Egypt, and put them with Jordan. And all of a sudden, Israel becomes a much stronger. Now, everyone's having a problem with this whole idea that the beachfront in Gaza is going to be some sort of Riviera.
Yeah.
But the reality is it stabilizes Israel, our greatest ally. We need a strong Israel. And by the way, there is no one that thinks that you can increase the amount of animosity that hardcore Hamas, Hezbollah, and the people from Gaza who put Hamas into their parliament, the animosity towards Israel and the United States. We're fools if we think there's going to be
absolutely ridiculous.
All right, Judge, if I will get to you, Aaron Matta, I've only got 2 minutes left, and I want to get to you first. I mean, what do you make of this announcement and this administration's approach to what is going on in Gaza and the fallout that we could see?
For a long time now, the U.S. has paid lip service to caring about Palestinian rights and self-determination, while in real life actively helping Israel undermine it. So Trump is now, with his comments, openly making plain the prevailing racism and contempt for Palestinian life. So his comments are very offensive, but policy-wise, they're actually nothing new. The U.S. has been helping Israel occupy and displace Palestinians for decades now. The problem with this conversation is it ignores the fact there is a solution on the table. Arab states have offered Israel for a long time full normalization if Israel finally ends its military occupation, allows for a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, which is just 22% of their historic homeland, what used to be called Palestine. That's why they call themselves Palestinians, because they used to live in land that Israel expelled them from, stole their homes. So it's Israel and the U.S. that stand alone in blocking the internationally agreed upon solution, which is Palestinians having a major compromise and accepting just 22% of their historic homeland. And that's what Trump now is trying to obscure. And unfortunately, Democrats, being complicit in the genocide, are ignoring this too.
All right, Joseph, I want to get to you very quickly. I've got just under a minute left. Go ahead.
Yes, just to Eric's comment, I mean, it's patently ridiculous. I mean, there is a way to make people more resentful of the United States. If he thinks that this is the way to not do it, he's sadly mistaken.
I didn't say there was a way to not do it. I'm saying you can't heighten the distaste and the hate that the hardcore Arabs have for Israel and the West like us.
You absolutely can, and this will.
Okay.
Disagree.
Rina, I've still got 30 seconds left. Do you want to jump in there?
At the end of the day, these countries that surround, Gaza, I think they could have done a lot more. If you're a Muslim nation, you should be stepping up for your fellow Muslims. And I think we've seen them fail at that. And look, I think America's had Israel's back too much with money, but these Muslim nations need to step up for their people.
Okay, we are going to have to leave it there. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.